Okay, Brad, we're going to start with you on this question. This time, please tell our audience, how do you envision improving the way law enforcement responds to situations involving individuals experiencing mental health crisis?
So throughout this campaign, I've had numerous conversations with individuals throughout our community in regards to mental health crisis that we have in here. And one of the things that keeps coming up is, what do we do to make the officers that we currently have on the roads more competent and better trained in handling individuals that are in a mental health crisis? I gave that a lot of thought, and one of the most prevalent things that kept coming to my mind is the fact who you hire is the first and foremost, most prevalent thing to answer that question. You can take an individual that's been on the road for 20 years, you can put him in specialized training year in, year out, every single time, but if he doesn't have the mentality, if he doesn't have the disposition, if he doesn't have the want or the drive to actually deal with people appropriately that are in a mental health crisis, you're not going to get it. You can put him in specialized training for 20 years straight. That all begins day one when you're hired. If that person does not have the mentality, if he doesn't have the desire, if he doesn't already have the predisposition that he wants to effectively help individuals that are in a mental health crisis, it's going to do absolutely nothing. So that all starts with the type of individuals that you're going to be hiring. That all starts with the type of, in your interviews, in your backgrounds, in your education, in your wants, in your desires.
Thank you. Kevin, how do you envision improving the way that law enforcement responds to situations involving individuals experiencing mental health crisis?
I think we've done that several years ago. I see a lady standing in the back, Miss Ingrid Barber, that we worked with her along with the city of Covington and then the town of Clifton Floors and Chief Whitline. It took us about 3 or 4 years or maybe longer, and we received a grant to start a crisis intervention site, which is located at the Regional Hospital. We have 95% of our officers that went through the CIT training, 40-hour training, to help them deal with people that are in a mental crisis. When we were going through this to start this program, nobody else really wanted to step up and take those officers on, so we at the Sheriff's Office, we hired three officers. We had sent them through the jail academy, and then they're housed at the hospital, that when officers out on the street deal with people that are having a mental health crisis, officers were getting tied up at, for hours and hours on hours, sitting with them, in the hospital and taking people off the road. So the idea was, let's have this crisis intervention site that a lot of other localities have been around a lot of places a whole lot longer. But we house that, officers are able to take those people into that facility, hand them over to those officers, and then the officers that we need to get back out on the road, because we have 4 deputies out here in this vast county, that's 450 square miles, maybe 1 trooper, possibly 2 at the most. So, there's a shortage of officers to go around, and then, like I said, it's funny, but we train our people, go through the training, we have to deal with mental health first aid. We have a great partnership with our community services board in this program, whenever we do this.
Thank you. Kyle, how do you envision improving the way law enforcement responds to situations involving individuals experiencing mental health crisis?
Okay, first let me say that our nation has a mental health problem. We tend to blame other issues every time we have a mass shooting or every time we have something go down in this country. And the problem with all this is that it is mental health, and we have got to come up with a way. And I'm probably not smart enough to come up with that way, but we have got to come up with a way to identify people early. And I'm not saying we need to mark these people in any way. We don't need to take any of their constitutional rights away. But we have to be able to identify them so that we can get them help. We're losing people every day to suicide. We're losing people every day to mass shootings. And we have to do something to stop that. Now, I'm going to disagree with Mr. Armitage. We can't hire college graduates to be every police officer that we have. Sheriff Hall has a hard time hiring 20 hires. The state police has a very difficult time meeting their recruiting demands. Clifton Forge, they can't hire enough people. We're not paying our officers enough to require college educations and things like that for them to come into this job or this career and expect them to be up here at the beginning of their tour. Mental health in this area, I've been on the end of both ends of it. I have seen officers handle mental health situations wonderfully. One of them is standing in the back of the room right now, Captain Scholl. I witnessed him sit down with a very difficult autistic young man, and he established a rapport with that young man. Everyone else, I asked all the other officers to back off, let him talk to this young man, because this young man was going to hurt himself, and he was possibly going to get hurt by the police officers.
Thank you. Sorry to cut you off.
I just want to say I've seen the other end of it as well, where officers have not handled it in the best way.
Thank you. Kevin, we're going to begin with you on this round. The next question for our audience to hear you answer is, how do you intend to address illegal drug use and its associated crimes in our country while maintaining community trust?
Well, when I became sheriff in 2008, immediately assigned a guy to the Alleghany County Drug Task Force. I worked with a guy when I was at Covington in 96 to 98, but he was a part-time assigned to the Drug Task Force. He had to do other criminal investigations. But you can imagine, 2 investigators, he was pretty well overwhelmed, but the guy taught me a lot of things about narcotics. And one of my first campaign is that I would have a full-time Drug Task Force investigator. And I continued that. Our other agencies in our area have not had a full-time investigator, and actually Clifton Forge dropped out many years ago when we tried to pick up the slack there. We've made 1,669 drug cases since January 1 of 2008. I'm sad to say that, but we make buys off of these people. We have offered drug court now that I hope that it took 5 years working with Ingrid Barber and Dan Como attorney at Stein, and now we have a drug court, so hopefully we can give people the help that they need. The people that need the help, we need to give them help. The people that we're afraid of is the ones we need to incarcerate. So I think it's shifted now from when I started in 1986. It was lock everybody up. And a lot of people want to lock them up, throw away the key, but I feel like some of the things that we're doing we're offering drug counseling inside the jail facility now. We have people from community service board coming in and talking to them. We need to change those people. We can give them hope, and we can change them, and we can make our community a better place to live.
Thank you. Kyle, could you tell our audience how you intend to address illegal drug use and its associated crimes in our county while maintaining community trust?
Yes, ma'am. And I think maintaining community trust falls into the accountability section. I've preached it since I announced my campaign on January 3rd. Accountability. I will hold myself accountable to the citizens, but I will also hold my officers accountable. And they have to perform dangerous jobs out here. Drug stops, drug traffic stops, but we always have to maintain our professionalism. We cannot lose a case because an officer does something that is not protocol, that is not within standard procedure. What I plan to do, I have discussed this with my counterparts that I used to work with the Virginia State Police. I believe that a third investigator needs to be totally devoted to drugs, a full-time drug investigator. Speaking with the state police, I'm very hopeful that they will supply another full-time drug agent to this area. So that would be the Drug Task Force, which has, I think, 3 officers on it at this time, a full-time deputy drug investigator, and a full-time state police drug investigator. They will not work against each other. They have to work with each other. The Drug Task Force will do their thing. They are a specific group. They're set up a special way to where each agency gets a certain amount of the money and the items that are seized. but a third investigator would belong to the sheriff's office. The accountability portion. Currently, the drug task force officer that is assigned from the sheriff's office, I do not know about the current one, but previous drug investigators have not reported to the sheriff very often. I'm not going to say at all, but very often. I will require at least once a week for my drug investigator to come and sit down and talk to me and tell me what's going on, what kind of cases they have working.
Thank you.
And that's my point.
Thank you. Brad, would you like me to repeat the question one more time?
For the audience, yeah.
For the audience, okay. How do you intend to address illegal drug use and its associated crimes in our county while maintaining community trust?
My viewpoint into this question goes in a completely different direction than the other two candidates did. To say that we have a drug problem is almost the equivalent of in the middle of a rainstorm, you go out to your front door, open it, look outside, turn around and tell your family, oh, it's wet outside. Yeah, no kidding, we have a drug problem. Dealing with a drug problem and trying to actually curtail it, I think entails a lot. It actually has to deal with the lack of economic development that we have in the area, also with the mental health crisis that we have in the area and nationwide, which is true. The thing that I don't like, and I actually hate seeing, 669 drug cases, 669 arrests. And the majority of the time that you see something put on the news, it has a picture of the individuals, which, in my terminology, those are the end users. The drugs don't go any further. They're the ones that are using it. The problems we have are the individuals that are delivering it into Alleghany County. The problem is where it's coming from, which goes into gets into a whole different conversation in dealing with the drug task force and the competency and their ability to reach out, which I'm not even going to get into. But to digress, a lot of that has to deal with community policing. I can't tell you how many times as a deputy in the middle of the night, at 2 o'clock in the morning, I would get a phone call from a friend or a family member of a user saying they need help. They don't need jail. We need, please help us. And I lost count of how many people that I got, that I helped their family and their friends, get them into counseling, get them going in the right direction, trying to keep them out of jail. So to answer your question, community policing is one of the most big priorities.
Thank you. Our next question is for the non-incumbents, Kyle and Brad. And Kyle, I'm going to start with you. Why do you think a change in sheriff leadership is needed?
Well, I'm just going to tell you why I chose. I have a lot of leadership experience. I was promoted to sergeant in 1992 with the U.S. Army. I was promoted to sergeant with the state police in 2007. I believe that the leadership of the sheriff's office has stalled, if you will. I believe that I would be able to take the sheriff's office to the next level. I'm not saying that Kevin has done anything wrong in his leadership style. There are many different leadership styles in this world. My leadership style is one that I learned a long time ago, and I have been able to use it in different situations: military, combat environments, state police, dealing with mentally ill people, dealing with children. We all have leadership styles, and I just believe that my leadership style is different, and I believe that I would move forward with the sheriff's office.
Thank you. Brad, why do you think a change in sheriff's leadership is needed?
As a sheriff's deputy, I unfortunately was able to see.
You never knew, you kept going back to the same place, but I think there's been a real emphasis on when the law changed that, you had to make an arrest. You knew who was the primary aggressor. So I think some of those things are bleed over each other, but the drug issue is the one. And that's why I think we've taken a lot of steps to try to help with that through, like I talked about the drug court. I learned a lot of these things from other different places. I'm not the smartest guy in this room, but you go to the conference or you go to the national conference, you go to other areas, you meet other sheriffs, and you learn about these things and how they work and what works for them. And that's why I asked him, and I do these things, and I expect my people to be highly trained, so I have to have myself highly trained. But that is probably the biggest issue, and I think that us bringing in the Community Services Board and having them come in and teach, the recovery lessons, and we started the medically assisted treatment and the opioid crisis, it's still ongoing. We actually had a call for an overdose today. And somebody called me and said, hey, there was a deputy going like 80 miles an hour down the road. Well, it was an overdose. They're trying to go out and administer Narcan so that they'll save some. But the drug issue is everywhere nationwide, and it's bleeding over into every area, and we're causing minor crimes that lead to those people that need the money.
Thank you. Kyle, what is the number one crime-related issue that needs to be immediately addressed and why?
I would have to agree with Kevin on that. As far as the drugs, it's probably number one, domestic violence and child abuse. We have a lot of different cases in this county that children are being abused and neglected. And I think that some of those, a lot of those cases need to be investigated and prosecuted. Now, let me backstep just a little bit. Talking about the domestic violence, I grew up in a home where a woman was beaten probably every weekend. And I said that I would never allow that to happen on my watch. So that will be a crime that is aggressively prosecuted if I become sheriff. The drugs, I already told you, I do have a plan. I do have a plan to aggressively pursue the drugs. But I agree with one other thing that Kevin said. We have to keep these people from coming back to jail. We have got to get in their heads when they're young and when they are a first-time offender that jail is not a place where you want to be. We have too many single parents. We have too many grandchildren being raised by their grandparents. And we don't need that. We have got to get involved in this community.
Thank you. Brad, can you tell the audience what is the number one crime-related issue that needs to be immediately addressed and why?
I don't think there's a person in this room that's going to deny that our number one issue in crimes in Alleghany County is going to be the drug issues. Again, I look at it in a different direction than these two because I believe that the stalled economic development that we've had in this area for decades contributes to that. And it also goes into the local and national mental health issue and the crisis that we're having. Because, as an example, you have an individual that is living in an area that doesn't have a prevalency of jobs, finds himself unemployed. Whether it be his family structure, friends, or however he grew up, wasn't taught the necessary coping mechanisms in order to deal with some of life things that you face in life. So one of the easiest and most prevalent things that a lot of people do is that if you're stressed, you don't know where to turn, you don't know what to do, all of a sudden you start taking drugs. I think economic development, and I prioritize economic development in this area, is going to help stabilize and prevent a lot of drug and a lot of other crimes that are associated with drug issues. In dealing with a drug issue, and again, being a mental health crisis, making sure that our officers are specifically trained to handle and being able to know that an individual is in a mental health crisis is paramount. And something I would like to say, Kyle Moore made a comment about us not being able to hire officers that have a bachelor's degree or advanced training. I never said anything about a bachelor's degree or the education you have. That was specifically about the individual that has the mentality and the determination and the will to actually deal with people a certain way. That had nothing to do with age, and it had absolutely nothing to do with education.
Thank you.